maybe have a location already in mind, and I'm guessing for most of you, at least one of your internships is going to be here in Indiana or the Indianapolis area, right? We're then going to talk about ways you can find out about companies, whether they're here in Indiana or anywhere in the country. And then finally, we're going to get very specific, and I'm going to show you some ways to get information about local businesses, and that includes companies that maybe haven't even advertised an internship yet, but based on the information you find out, they probably could use an intern, and probably you could contact them and get the ball rolling on that. All right, if you're on your Moodle site, get out of this. I need to get into your class. This is section 2, is that correct?
It is.
Okay. All right, so we're going to get to today's date, and if you're on here, if you will please click on your course slip guide. Okay, how many of you took first year business experience, FBE? I guess I should ask who has not taken FBE. All right, so you've all taken it, so you may remember, if you can think back 2 years ago, I would have come into your classroom and we would have talked about research resources. I'm not going into as many 300 level courses this semester as I typically do. However, I'm sure some of you are taking marketing right now with Professor Chamberlain or Professor McQuiston. Would I be correct on that? Okay, so looking at something like this should be pretty familiar to you. If, as those of you I just mentioned in those marketing courses, if I talk about a resource up here and you're currently using it for a project, and there's something you'd like to share with everyone in here, please feel free. For today, and actually for the rest of the semester while you're in this course, this is the online research guide that I've prepared that's sort of customized to what you're going to be doing. And the way this is set up is what I just talked about. It starts off broadly, and it gets more narrow. Now, having said that, I want to say to you, the way or the order in which we're going to do research today is not necessarily the order in which you will do it. You may figure out, there's a company here in Indianapolis that I want to know more about. You'll find information about that company, and then you're going to work your way this way to find out more about the industry. So I just want to make sure you understand the way we do it today isn't set in stone as to how you have to do it. Professor Thomas, have you talked to them about the LAMP assignment?
Not yet.
Okay. So today, two purposes. One, to help you in general with your career search. But two, to help you with an assignment that your professor's going to tell you more about probably the next session.
At the end of class.
At the end of class. All right. Well, I'm going to put an acronym up here. Maybe there's no markers. Is it here? Okay, here it is. I know you can't all see this. LAMP. Okay. So there's something that's known as the LAMP worksheet or spreadsheet. And this is a tool that was created or put out there by a gentleman named Steve Dalton. He's a career counselor at a university you may have heard of, Duke University. He's written a book about this method called the 2-Hour Job Search. And LAMP stands for, L stands for list. You're going to create a list of companies that you have an interest in. A stands for alumni. You're going to try and find out, are there Butler alumni that are somehow connected with your company? If not Butler alumni, any contact in general. M stands for motivation. How motivated are you to look into this company for a job? And P stands for posting. Does the company already have jobs posted? What you're going to end up doing for your professor, based on some of the research I'm going to show you how to do today, you're going to put together your own LAMP spreadsheet on which you're going to have a list of what? 20, 10, 20, 30 companies? 20 to 40 companies that you've identified that you may have an interest in. Now, if I say to you right now, could you make a list of 20 to 40 companies that meet those criteria? How comfortable would you be if your professor says, okay, end of class, hand me a list, 20 companies that you know you might want to do an internship or job with. Not confident? By the end of this class, you should feel pretty darn good about that, because I'm going to show you ways to do it. You might even have your LAMP spreadsheet started by the time we leave class. All right, so any questions for me at this point on what we're going to try to do in the next hour? All right, are you ready to get into some research? Okay. So thinking back to FBE, we talked about industries in FBE. We talked about ways that you can describe industries using a code. Anyone remember what that code was called? And you can cheat and look at your LibGuide if you want. I hear some whispers. What is it?
CIF.
Rhymes with lakes, NAICS. Does that ring a bell? Okay, just to show you what a research nerd I am, I actually have a poster that I keep in my office. I forgot to bring this to your last class. I don't know if you can see this small print. This is how many NAICS codes there are, meaning this is how many industry classifications that the United States Census Bureau uses to collect information on industries. So when I say to you, do you know if you have a passion for an industry, and you say back, well, I don't know all the industries out there, this is one way for you to find out. And so on your LibGuide, if you will click on that first link for NAICS, this hopefully looks a little bit familiar to you. This is taking you out to the U.S. Census Bureau website. NAICS codes can be anywhere from 2 to 6 digits. If they're 2 digits, that means they're very broadly defined. When they get out to 6 digits, they're very narrowly defined. As a way for you to start getting familiar with industries and what they're called, one thing I recommend is you come to this site, maybe go down to number 54, Professional, Scientific, and Technical Services, and this is just an example. Notice how it starts off with a 2-digit code, and then it starts going out to the 6-digit and gets more specific. And these are examples then of industries according to the government. And if you were to click on one of these, and you can click on any one you want, you get a little bit more help here, because you actually get a definition of this is what the government means when they talk about research and development in nanotechnology. So that was all I wanted to show you about NAICS codes, is to remind you that they exist and to tell you that on this LibGuide for your class, I put a link to them. So if you are at the stage where you're trying to figure out industries you have an interest in, this is one place you can go to find out. So questions on that? Pretty cut and dry. Sort of the type of reading to do when you're having trouble falling asleep at night is go look at the NAICS website, and that might help you. All right, so the next sources we're going to look at that will help you get information on a broad industry level are 2 databases. And I know all of you have taken FBE, so you are already involved with one of these, and that's the first one we're going to look at, which is called First Research. So when you open it up, it's going to make you jump through a couple of hoops. You have to hit continue a couple of times, and then submit. Does this look familiar? I hope some of you are actually using it this year in your other 300 level courses. All right, so very easy to use this. You have a basic search box where you can either put in a keyword or one of those NAICS codes. For the example I'm going to use, I'm going to ask anyone in here like to go to amusement parks, Kings Island, Holiday World, that type of thing. All right, so let's assume that you're someone, you're into amusement parks. The idea of maybe working for the amusement park industry appeals to you. And I'm not talking about you're the person who's taking tickets or running the roller coaster. You're working for an amusement company in marketing, finance, accounting, operations, you name it. So to help you in that search, you can come in here and just type amusement park in that search box, and then click on search. It's going to bring up all the reports in here that have some kind of mention of amusement parks. Let's look at the first one, amusement parks and arcades. Okay, so you're now looking at an industry report for the industry of amusement parks. A couple things I want you to notice. First of all, notice the date in the upper right-hand corner. fairly recent, which is good. Do not want to go into an interview with a company in a particular industry and you're looking at a report to prepare yourself, and that report is 5-10 years old. You want as recent as you can get. Other things to notice in here, you can follow social media for the industry right from this page, and it's updated on a regular basis. You can get news. If you look on the left, on the first column, these are all the different areas of information that you can find. I'm going to point out two things to you on this report that make it unique, so you're probably going to want to take a note on this. A little background about First Research. First Research is a company that started 12-15 years ago as a very small startup company in North Carolina. And the people who started this market research company did it because they knew there were salespeople out there who were making cold calls on companies in a bunch of different industries, and the salespeople really didn't know that much about the industry. So they started conducting research and putting these reports together to help those salespeople become knowledgeable, and you can use these in the same way. Because of that, that is why in this left first column where it says call prep questions, if you'll open that up. So these are questions, someone who is trying to figure out what's going on in the amusement park industry. These are questions you could use as a conversation starter. And I want you to notice that they hit on all the different aspects of a business. Operations, marketing, customers, regulation, technology, and so on. So my suggestion to you, if you're preparing to interview for an internship or your job down the road, if you come to something like this, you can very quickly scan through it and get a feel for, these are some intelligent questions that I might ask during my interview. So that would be something to take a note on, is check out the call prep section of the First Research report. The other section I want to point out to you, and I'm going all the way back up to the top, and we're looking in that first column again, under call prep questions where it says websites and acronyms. So you may or may not remember from FBE, but I am a very big fan of those things called trade associations and trade publications for doing research. So these are the organizations whose members or people who have an interest belong to them, and they're very specific to that industry. So notice, there's an International Association of Amusement Parks. There's a magazine called Amusement Today. So how does that differ from reading the Wall Street Journal? Does the Wall Street Journal just cover amusement parks and amusement parks only? No, it covers all kinds of things. But if I'm researching the amusement park industry, yeah, I'm going to look at the Wall Street Journal, but I really, really want to make my way to one of these publications that focuses in on that industry. And every report in this database will get you out to some of these websites where you can read about that industry and what's happening in it. So that might be another note to yourself, is go back and check out the websites and the acronyms. What do they mean by that? Well, every industry has its own jargon, its own language. If you could pick up on some of that jargon before you talk to someone in the industry, that's a good thing. And this is one way to do it. What questions do you have for me on this First Research? Pretty cut and dry, intuitive to use, would you say? All right, well, if no questions, we're going to jump out of it, and we're going to look at just one other database, which we now have. It's called IBIS World. It's at the bottom of that first box. Raise your hand if you have already started using IBIS World here at Butler. One, maybe two or three people. Okay. Again, if you're taking other 300 level courses that involve industry research, you really should be looking at this. The background on IBIS World. I've been here at Butler for 12 years. From my first year that I got here, I wanted this database. Butler didn't have it then. Well, it's expensive. Kept asking, and about 5 years ago, I set up a trial of this database for all of the FBE sections to use for their Top Dog project, and they loved it. And I said, please give me feedback, send me emails, and they did. I took those emails to my dean. last year, I got this database for you all, and I hope you'll explore it. The reason it's expensive is because they cover not only the broad industries, but the very specialized niche industries, which for many of you, that's what you're going to end up working in, are very specialized industries. It's easy to use. Again, you see you have a search box. You can plug in your NAICS code if you have one, or you can plug in a keyword. Anyone in here accounting major? 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. So let's try for our example in IBIS world, go ahead and type accounting. By the way, if you're not an accounting major, you can go back and try your own searches later. So I'm going to hit accounting. And if you scroll down now, you're going to start seeing reports in IBIS world that have something to do with accounting. Now, for most keywords that you plug in, you're going to get something that looks like this right here. It's going to be a report. It'll have the industry name, and it'll say for in the U.S. So it's a broad report on the entire country. IBIS World has started preparing reports for states. So for example, accounting services in the state of Illinois. So that's even more specific. Unfortunately, Indiana is not one of the states that they are currently writing those reports for, but they eventually will. Let's go ahead and open up this one here, accounting services in the U.S. You're going to see tabs running across the top. I want you to notice again the date. And here you actually have the name of the analyst. So knowing that it's current and someone was willing to put their name on it, that adds to the credibility of what you're looking at, of course. All right, so the biggest mistake that I see people do when they open something like this up is they browse through the first page, which there is great info on that first page, and then they're done. And if you do that, you're missing out on great information that you can find under these other tabs. So for example, products and markets. This is going to tell you, obviously each industry has segments with different products and different services. This is going to break those down for you. You can find things in here about how competitive is the market. It has a tab for major companies. I do want to tell you these are typically the very big guys, okay? Keep that in mind because most of you, I'm guessing, will not end up working for the really, really big guys, and that's okay. But in terms of research, that's what they cover. So like I said, easy to use. You just click along on some tabs. And the main difference, and you may want to make a note if you haven't already, if you're interested in researching a very specialized industry, I would start with IBIS World and then look at First Research. So if you're just not into the automotive industry, but you're into the auto detailing industry, IBIS World's your place to start. Questions on that? I think any of it's super difficult. It's just, you just have to tell yourself, I'm going to be doing some reading to get some great information. Okay, well, if no questions, we're going to jump out and talk. Oh, yes?
Can I just point out what
Yes.
struck me from Monday's class and what I just used today? I don't know if anyone in here is interviewing with a company called Texas. They'll be here for an accounting, a forensic accounting internship and job opportunity tomorrow and Friday. So we've been working with students on those interviews. If you look right there, forensic accounting services in the U.S. I mean, you click on it and you're ready for your interview. No, in terms of industry research,
Right.
it's all right there. It could be packaged any better. So, I mean, if you've got an interview coming up, I don't think anything needs this in terms of doing industry research really quickly.
Right. Yeah, and I think the more you all explore this, you're going to understand why I, as your business librarian, have wanted to get this for 12 years. It's that helpful for your research. All right, well, if no questions, go ahead and X out of there. And now on your LibGuide, we're going to jump over to the second tab. We're going to get more localized in terms of industry information. So I have 3 links on here, and 2 of them are super easy to use. So I'm going to have us just open them so you can look at it and get that imprint on your brain of what these things look like, and then we're going to spend more time together on the third one. So the first link on there, USA.com. Right away you can tell ways to search it, keywords, or you can click on a location on the map. You can click on any state you want. I'm going to click on Indiana. So if you're trying to evaluate locations, what is the economy like in XYZ state? What's the crime rate like? What's the typical income or career opportunities in that state? What's the education rate, and so on. This is a real quick and easy source that you can go to get that information, just to give you a general feel of how is the economy doing in Illinois or California or wherever. So that might help you in terms of narrowing down locations. So like I said, easy to use. Did anyone have any trouble? I assume not. All right, so I'm going to X out of that. The second one I want to show you that you can go back and explore further is the second link on here that says Stats America. It's going to look like this. Anyone use this yet? For another class or on your own? Well, it has a sister site that's called Stats Indiana. So if you're focusing just on Indiana, you could jump right to Stats Indiana. But Stats America, as the name implies, provides information for all across the nation. Stats America is maintained by the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. So they're collecting all this information, mostly from the government, and they're making it easy for you to find. Each one of these boxes opens up a page that's interactive. Lets you play around with clicking on different things to get to exactly what you want. So for example, this big radius tool, if you know you want to do an internship in the Indianapolis area and you know you don't want to drive more than 25 miles from downtown to get there, you can use the radius tool to help you look at an area within just that specific radius. You can also look at neighborhoods, cities, counties. If you're into all things related to innovation, they have a couple cool tools in here that you can explore which cities or areas of this country are doing innovative things. So this is a fun site, and I recommend you go back and play with it on your own later on and see what's in there for you. So questions on Stats America? No? All right, well, this next site we're all going to spend a little bit more time on together, and it's called US Cluster Mapping. So go ahead and open that. Again, let me ask, has anyone in here used this? I actually started using it myself just within the past year upon the recommendation of someone who works in the Butler Career Office. So this site is maintained by a government office in conjunction with a business school you may have heard of, Harvard Business School. Okay? So in terms of credibility, we should feel decent about it. You can use this site in two main ways. Looking up regions or looking up what they're calling industry clusters. And to see what that means, when I click on, let's see, where is it? Cluster. A cluster is a regional concentration of related industries. So if I'm interested in the grocery store industry, there's other industries that feed into that into grocery store industry, right? Food manufacturers, distributors, and so on. The reason you should take a look at this is you may have an industry in mind, maybe a broad thing like healthcare, tons of sub-industries that make up the healthcare cluster. And this tool, this page, is going to tell you how that industry cluster is doing in certain parts of the country. So, for example, here, if you'll click where it says local clusters, click on Learn More. Wait a minute. Let me start over. I may have told you wrong. Okay, I'm sorry. Please go back to the beginning. If you just click on cluster mapping in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you back to this page. It looks like this. And now what I'd like for you to do, on the right where it says Explore Data by Cluster, go ahead and open that. And then scroll to the bottom to see this beautiful infographic that they have prepared to show you some of the broad industries and how they're interconnected. I'd like for us as a class to look together at the same industry cluster, and that is this one near the top where it says medical devices. So go ahead and click on that. So the first thing you'll see is they're showing you industries that feed into it. Go ahead and scroll all the way up to the top until you see a chart that looks like this. Take a look. What pops out at you, if anything? What pops out at you about the medical devices cluster in terms of employment by state? Say it again. California really dominates. Who's number 2? Indiana. The state of Indiana is very well known for the medical devices industry, which means there's major employers in this state in the medical devices industry, which means for you all, there's probably opportunities if you have an interest in terms of the medical device industry. If you scroll on down and click where it says explore this cluster's top regions right here, it's going to bring up a map of the country. Wherever you see the darker areas highlighted, that's where this industry is more important. And right now it's showing you economic areas in the country that have a high level of specialization in medical devices. You come over here to the left and change that. So right now it's showing specialization. If you click on the drop down, maybe you want to take a look at job creation in this industry. You maybe didn't notice, but some of the colors changed on here. Originally, Minnesota was showing up as being highly specialized, but not so much in terms of job creation. However, Indiana is still pretty high up there in terms of creating jobs in this industry. So as you can see here, there's lots of things you can look at. What's the growth rate? What's the annual wages? How quickly are annual wages growing for this industry, and where? Where is that happening? Some questions about what we just looked at. So the main thing you might take a note is this is a great tool. Number one, that's free. It's not like a database that you're going to you can only get to while you're here at Butler. You can get to this for the rest of your career as long as Harvard and the government keep putting this together. But it's a way to help you figure out, hey, what industries are doing well and where are they doing well, and do I have an interest in that location in that industry? Plus, it would give you some great info to maybe talk about in your job interview. Questions on this last tool that we looked at in terms of localized industry information? I think also if you were to use something like this in one of your econ classes, the professor would probably really be into it and like it. So that's the other thing I want to say. Everything I'm showing you today, you don't have to use it just for this class. If you're taking another class that has some kind of research assignment and one of these things works for it, go for it. You don't have to ask permission from me or your professor to use any of this. All right, so if no questions, I can tell some of you are really looking intently at your screen. So I hope that means that you're really into this tool and you want to go back and use it. Let's pop out of it unless you have questions. Going back to your lib guide now. All right, we're going to switch now from talking about resources for getting information on industries to resources that will help you get information about companies. And so on this third tab that says company information, a couple things that I want to point out to you. When you think about a company, before you even start typing anywhere, you should be thinking about that company's family tree. What do I mean by that? Anyone? Any guesses? When I say, what's the company's family tree? What do you think I mean? Or if you had to tell someone, well, this company's family tree is made up of...
Like, if it's a subsidiary, who its parent company is, or if it's a large corporation, what different subsidiaries it has.
Did you all hear what he said? So typically there's a parent company, and if the company's larger, They have branches that come off of it that may be subsidiaries or maybe very localized operations. So for example, I don't know if you've heard of a company called Yum Brands, Y-U-M, Yum Brands. Have you heard of KFC and Taco Bell and Pizza Hut? Those three companies are part of the family tree of Yum Brands. Yum Brands is the parent, and then you have the branches coming under those. And think about how many locations of Taco Bell or Pizza Hut or KFC there are. The reason I want you to be aware of something like this is when you get into some of these databases, the database is going to ask you, do you want to look at the parent company or do you want to look at one of the branches? Or it may not ask you that. You may type in a company name and it comes back with 30 different reports, all under the same company name. How do you figure out which one you want to look at? My advice to you is, unless you know you're wanting to look at a particular branch location, start with the headquarters or start with the parent company. Let's think about public versus private companies in terms of research. Which is easier to find information on, public or private? Public, for sure, and you all know that. Why is that? What do public companies have to do that makes it easier for you as a researcher?
They publish an annual report.
They publish an annual report. So public companies are required to report out to the SEC on an annual basis and throughout the year. And everything they report out to the SEC is available to you for free. So it makes it easier for you to get info. Private companies don't have that requirement, and it can be tougher to find information on private companies. And the matter of fact is, my guess is most of you will end up working for a private company instead of a public. There's just more of them. So I want you to make a note. This database here, PrivCo. This is a new database. We've had it for about a year, and the entire database is intended for doing research on private companies. So I think this is one that would come in handy for you. But the one we're going to focus on, and I have other ones listed on here, by the way, and certainly you should look at any of them that you want to. But I want you to get familiar, if you're not already, with a database that's called A to Z databases. Go ahead and open it up. It's the one right here at the top. Show of hands, who has used this already? Half a dozen of you for another class? Okay, what do you think so far? Easy to use? Okay. I think we've only had it like 2 semesters maybe, and people who have been using it really like it. It's easy to use and you can do a lot of things with you. The primary purpose of using it is company research, but you can use it for consumer research. And I'm talking about consumer research down to the name, like your neighbor down the street type of research. They collect information in here based on surveys. So if someone filled out a survey and said, hey, I love to play golf, and I'm trying to sell golf carts in Kokomo, Indiana, and I want to mail that brochure out to everyone that said they had an interest in golfing, I can use that database, this database, to get that info. 2 things I'm going to have us look together at in class, and the first thing we're going to look at, I'm just going to tell you up front, you're probably going to want to spend a lot of time looking at it, and I'm going to have you stop at a certain point so we can move on to something else. But that is this find a job category. This, you've all heard of Indeed.com, probably. So Indeed.com, information from their site is pulled into this database. And the difference is you have more ways to play around with that information than you do on the Indeed.com website. So if you click here where it says Advanced Search under Find a Job, it's going to open up a place for you to put in specific information. And notice here where it says Show Jobs of Type. Full-time, part-time, contract, and internship. So if I go in here and I choose internship, and I just do a real simple search and say I want an internship within 10 miles of Indianapolis, and hit search. Got 200 results, which is a lot. This is interesting to work at, and who's to say someone in here may use this and end up finding the perfect internship. A couple things to be aware of. Dates. Some of these were posted few months ago, so chances are good they've already been filled. They're just still showing up on here. One way to use this, if you're not sure, what are typical job titles out there that are being advertised or posted regarding internships? This is a real quick way to get an idea of what some of these job titles are. And I'm sure there's many on here that maybe you have not heard of before. So that would be another way that I would use it. But I just put out a word of caution that some of this may be old. Did you have anything you wanted to add about this, Professor Thomas?
Yeah, and how are we going to apply if we find something out there that we're interested in? If we find something we're interested in, tying back to the concept a couple weeks ago, what's the best application route if you find something you're interested in? Are you going to go to Indeed and apply? Where would you go to apply? Anybody?